Good afternoon, Chairman. Sorry, Chairman, you're muted.
The first faux pas of the afternoon. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Councillor Mark Whittington, and I'm the Executive Support Councillor for Finance and Resources at Lincolnshire County Council. It's 3 p.m. on the 28th of January 2021, and this is the annual LCC budget consultation meeting with key stakeholders. I just want to welcome all those people who are attending this afternoon. We will welcome your contributions later on. Just to advise you that this meeting is being recorded and also audio broadcasted via the council's website. If anybody wishes to speak after the presentation, if they could indicate by writing speak in the chat function, I'll be keeping an eye on that. But Rachel, if you wouldn't mind looking as well and just advising, and if I do get anybody out of order, please accept my apologies. Hopefully everybody wishes to make a contribution will be able to. Before we start, I just would like Rachel Wilson just to confirm the presence of all those people in attendance. So over to you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We have the following people in attendance. We have Councillor Whittington, Executive Support Councillor for Resource and Communication, who is chairing the meeting. We also have Councillor Hill, Leader of the Council, Andrew Crookham, Executive Director for Resources, Michelle Grady, Assistant Director of Finance, Dave Simpson, Head of Technical and Development Finance, Karen Hayes from Unite the Union, Richard Wright from FBU, and there's a few more that have joined. We have Samantha Knowles from South Holland District Council and Alison Hall-Wright from South Kesteven District Council. Is there anyone that I have missed?
Yep, there's myself, Craig Thompson from the Voice section of Community of the Union.
Yes, there's also myself, Robert Clark, from Lincolnshire County Council.
Yes. Sean McGarry from Golders and Brandage and the Lincolnshire Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, and Ken Rustage from Lincolnshire NEU.
I think that's everyone, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Rachel. As I say, if anybody subsequently does join the meeting, if you can monitor and just do the chat function for me, that would be very useful.
I will, Chairman.
Would now like to invite Michelle Grady, who's the Assistant Director of Finance here at LCC, who is going to give us all the presentation on the Council's budget proposals for 21-22. So over to you, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michelle Grady. I'm the Assistant Director for Finance here at Lincolnshire County Council. I've got a slideshow to present to you this afternoon, which will basically pick up some of the key context in terms of the national position that's impacting on our budget proposals for this year, and then some detail about the budgets themselves and what we're proposing in terms of the budget setting for 21-22. So I've just put the agenda up on the screen. There'll be the key points that I'll be going through during the presentation. So just in terms of national headlines, I think those that are most relevant to us in terms of the announcements by government prior to this year. So back in December and November, we got the spending review announcements by the government, and then we've had our own provisional settlements as well announced. Key things for us in terms of those national announcements was that the council tax limit, referendum limit for us at Lincolnshire County Council would be a 2% referendum limit for general increases in council tax, but also following on from previous years, the ability to raise a 3% additional precept in relation to adult social care services, with the option to defer that increase for a year if we want to. Core spending power increased, announced at 4.5%. It's probably worth mentioning, though, that that is predominantly based on local council tax increases. So 86 6% of that increase is based on the councils implementing the full 5% council tax increase. And just a couple of announcements there about public sector pay and national living wage increases and public sector pay being frozen. But also the government announced additional measures for financial support for councils due to extra costs and losses of income. Just a slide there to give you a bit of a demonstration about how the nature of our funding's changed over the last decade. So the large green bar is council tax funding, with 62% of this now being part of our core spending total. And you can see that that's changed to become a larger increase and a larger part of our funding over the last few years. The blue bar at the bottom, the blue part at the bottom is effectively our settlement funding assessment, which comes from government. And as you'll see, over the last 3 years, that's pretty much remained static. So our provisional settlement in terms of funding directly to us, there was a couple of key announcements in there for us. 300 million nationally put into an additional social care grant. Our allocation of that was just over 5 million, and some increases in the national element of the Rural Services Delivery Grant. So we got a little bit more than we expected there. So our allocation for that was 7.2 million. The large announcements were about the continued support for COVID costs. So we were announced that we would get an extra £15 million in the new year to support those continuing cost pressures around COVID, but also some compensation grants available to us. So compensation for the increased uptake of the local council tax reduction schemes, which was based on working aged adult applicants, value of 5.3 million to us, and also a guarantee to fund 75% of business rates and council tax losses due to COVID. In terms of some context of our COVID expenditure and losses, so during the current financial year, we're forecasting that we probably will have spent and lost in terms of income losses around 94 million over the financial year, with 51 million being to do with general costs and 43 million pounds being to do with specific costs that we have had specific grants to cover. So we are getting a lot of grants to cover those things. And on the whole, the expenditure is being covered by the costs. In terms of the specific costs, there's areas like infection control, test and trace, the care home testing. Obviously, the community testing has been a big programme that's been rolled out recently. Contain outbreak management, the winter grant and hardship money, and additional support for school transport. Again, that we've had announcements to say that we will get some additional funding, and that will carry on into 21-22. And whilst we're in lockdown, we're getting funding to support particularly around the testing and the contain outbreak management measures that have been put in place. So this slide just gives you a feel for all the major services that we support. So at the top there, adult social care being one of our largest areas of spend. Also children's social care. So public health, highways, transport, including concessionary fares, we have a responsibility for. Education services, environmental services, which include waste disposal, although not collection, and cultural services such as libraries, fire and rescue services, and community safety, including areas like trading standards and public health. This pie chart just gives you a feel of our sources of finance and funding. It is a little misleading in that the biggest pie chart there is related to schools and the dedicated schools grant, which is effectively just passported directly through to schools and academies. So we receive the funding and we pass it straight on to the schools and academies, and they have full delegated powers to spend that money. The next largest pie chart there is a little purple one that you can see there, which is council tax, which, if you exclude the schools, is around 62% of our spending, our funding now to support our spending, with business rates, income and grants and contributions being a significant element of our funding too. In terms of our spend, our budgeted spend, gross spend this year was £1.3 billion, again with a large proportion of that going directly to schools. But if you take the schools element out of that, our largest spending area is adult social care, with children's services being very closely behind as well. So our current budget strategy, we've set out a medium-term financial strategy in our budget papers, really reflecting some of the uncertainty around our funding, which help, obviously causes issues with us longer-term planning. So delays again on the local government reforms of local government funding. The council is in a position where we have a good record of delivering savings and operating within budgets. We've had a number of underspends over previous years, which have allowed us to establish earmarked reserves, which can support with our financial resilience. And one of our measures is that we aim to maintain the county council in a position in the lower quartile of council tax levels for county councils. This table just kind of demonstrates some of the recent trends in terms of financing and funding for the councils. So you'll see at the top of the table, 2011, a quite high level of general government grant. This was at a time when council tax freeze grants were available to local councils, and we were being encouraged to not increase local taxes. You can see over the years that that's changed quite significantly, with general grant reducing and much more reliance being placed on local taxation and council tax increases, with a sharp jump there in 2016-17, which was the point that the adult social care precept was first introduced and has been available to us every year since 2016. Also significant pressures that we've dealt with over the last decade in terms of price and demand increases, which have required us to make additional savings through that time as well. So our current medium-term plan has set out a position for the next 3 years. As we stand at the moment, we have got a small surplus for 21-22, but this is very provisional at the moment. I know we've got some district colleagues on the line, and they'll be well aware that we'll be waiting with bated breath to see their final positions in terms of council tax and business rates returns, because very much will be featured in what our final position is for our budget setting for 21-22. And our district colleagues have until the 31st of January, which I think is on Sunday, to return all of that information to us that will give us a much firmer position of where we are with those figures for 21-22. We do have, going on from the current year, we do have a planned forecast deficit in future years, which we will need to address, and hopefully we'll have a better view of our future funding at that point as well. So this is just a table across our service areas of the cost pressures we've had to include in our budgets this year. So we've seen some significant increases in terms of particularly in adults and children's. I'll come on to those in a second, but with a total of £26.7 million worth of cost pressures we've needed to actually find and add into our budgets for this year, for 21-22. So some of the key areas of cost pressures, I've just mentioned that some of the biggest areas is adults and children. So very much reflecting contract prices on adults in terms of national living wage increases, also in demand around the working age adult, increasing demand in that areas and complexity of need. Also in children's care, we've got some increased complexity of need and demand, very much being exacerbated by the COVID situation and the intensifying situations children find themselves in at home, and a need for specialist placements. Also got some large increases in home to school transport, mainly around, again, national living wage, demand, and also legislative changes that the contractors are having to deal with. Some other areas of increased cost pressures are around some of our waste contracts, particularly around mixed dry recycling, and an impact of reduced investment income in interest rate income on our other corporate budgets. In terms of savings, we've budgeted for £13 million worth of savings to come into this 21-22 proposals, but actually quite a lot of that is around additional income. So just some highlights there. Not planning any service reductions as part of the budget that's being proposed. There are some efficiencies for things like printing and changing some of our contracts in, for example, the salt we use in our gritters, but no planned service reductions for 21-22. In terms of our reserves, given our financial uncertainty, it's important that we maintain our reserves at a level that can sustain the council. So we hold two types of reserves. We hold a general reserve, which is usually kept at 2.5% to 3.5% of our total budget requirement, and that is the reserve of last resort. So very much there to, for desperate emergency needs. We also hold earmark reserves, mainly relating to either schools, balances, which is ring fence for schools, specific grants, or they are earmarked for specific use, such as holding reserves for flood management and bad weather management, things like that. So we do have a financial volatility reserve, which is a general reserve that we hold to support any shortfalls that we have in budget in year. And that currently stands at 42.6 million, 52.6 million even. Need to get some better glasses, I think. In terms of our capital programme, we have a 10-year capital programme and some large projects of work in there. We've got a 10-year gross programme of 526 million, and that includes the school's gross requirement of 131 million. We have a £7.5 million corporate development budget each year, which is there to support things like match funding opportunities and to support grant funding opportunities, and also some short notice opportunities that might come forward, and have a business case process that's in place to use that money. So just some flavour there of some of the schemes that are in our capital programme. Some of the major ones that are in our programme at the minute are the special school provision schools. Also, obviously, some major road schemes in the programme at the moment. The Lincoln Eastern bypass just coming to its end in terms of our financing, but Grantham Southern Relief Road, also in the programme, another large major road scheme in the programme. We also had announced as part of the settlement, the government support for the North Icon Relief Road. So we was awarded or offered £110 million towards the cost of that scheme, and work's currently underway to work out the profile of that spend. So in terms of council tax, I did mention that the referendum limit that was applied by government was a 2% increase allowable for general increased council tax and 3% for adult social care precept, with the option to defer that if we wish to. The proposal that we've built into our budget is to increase the general levy by 1.99% and to not apply the 3% adult care precept, with no decision to defer that at the moment. The little table there just gives you the impact on the county council's element of the Band D council tax on that decision. That should maintain us in the lowest quartile of the 27 English-Shire counties. It generates just over £6 million worth of extra funding for us, and it will be an increase on the council tax payer of £26.58 for a year's increase in council tax. Business rates pooling. So we are in a pool with the district councils, which enables us to benefit from any growth in business rates. that's been reflected quite hardly over the last year, but the pool is going to continue without South Holland District Council at the moment, and that's really just due to some risks that they've got in their tax base in terms of trying to remove the risk for us and for them in terms of any volatility in their ratepayers in that area. Being in that pool does generate some extra income for us, but also creates some risk. But hopefully the 1.8 additional funding that we've planned for will come to fruition, but clearly some impact there on the COVID situation. So in terms of our budget proposals, the consultation on our proposals has been open to the public during January. It's been scrutinised by all of our service scrutiny committees during January, and was scrutinised by our Overview and Scrutiny Management Board this morning. And obviously this meeting is part of that scrutiny process. So the next steps are that the budget consultation comments will go back to the executive on the 2nd of February, which is next Tuesday, and they will consider all of those comments before making their final recommendations to go forward to council on the 19th of February. I appreciate that was a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, so I'm quite happy now to hand over for any questions or comments or feedback that anyone would like to provide on the recommendations and proposals that are being put forward.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for a very, very thorough and comprehensive presentation. I can see that Ken has got his hand raised. So, Ken, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Just one question. How does Lincolnshire compare with the Shire counties in the East Midlands? You know, for example, Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, Leicestershire. You know, I mean, you know, it sounds a good thing it's maintained in the bottom 25%, but you know, what's it like with other ones? You know, it's difficult to compare with places like sort of Devon and North Yorkshire, similar big rural counties to Lincolnshire. And I just wondered, obviously, with that, what was the comparison? And I am aware, I think it was last year or the year before, I think Councillor Hill mentioned very, very astute comment about Northamptonshire, where they, you know, went disastrously wrong, and Lincolnshire was always ahead of that. So, thank you. Over.
I could just say that in terms of Nottinghamshire, I think they're in the highest quartile. So we are quite at the opposite end of the scale to Nottinghamshire. Not quite sure where we fall with all of the others in the East Midlands. I believe it's Worcestershire that's probably just lower than us in terms of the Shire counties, but I can make that information available. But obviously not all of the district, or not all of the councils have set their council tax yet. So until that's been done, it's very difficult to be quite specific about where we are.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Ken. The next question I've got, I've just got the name of S. Gary, I think it's from South Holland. Unfortunately, it doesn't give me.
No, it's Sean McGarry. I'm from Colders and Grandage in the Chamber of Commerce.
Right. Sorry, Sean.
That's fine. It's obviously I'm at work and it only puts on what work allow me to put on. My question really goes back to income. You mentioned that obviously because of the volatility in South Holland, they won't be in the business rates pooling this year. Has the impact of COVID on businesses across Lincolnshire, how has that impacted the business rate income in the current year, and what have you allowed for any impact in this coming year?
So it's a bit of a difficult one to kind of think about at the moment, in terms of there's been quite a lot of reliefs and grants paid to businesses over the last year. So maybe won't see the full impact of COVID on businesses, particularly like the high street and things like that, probably until future years. What will be an immediate impact is those rates that have needed to be collected, about whether they've been able to be collected, and that will impact on our deficit or surplus position on the councils, the district councils' collection funds, and that's the information we're waiting for, that they're due to provide us by the end of the month, just to see what the impact is in year about how they've been able to collect business rates and council tax over the year. So we're not quite sure what that position is going to look like. We've made plans for a neutral position, so we've not planned for a deficit or surplus in our assumptions, but just very much waiting for that information. But I think probably there'll be some immediate deficits just because of some of the difficulties of collecting business rates. But I do think we'll start to see the longer term impact of that as well, as we go forward, which might have been masked by some of the grants and reliefs that the government's provided over the last year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Michelle. Are there anybody else? Because I don't see all the attendees, but I can't see any raised hands, and I can't see anybody in the chat function. So is there anybody else who would just like to ask a question?
I think I can see, is it Ken Rustage with a hand up?
I think that might,
is that old?
I think it was a legacy hand. Apologies.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. If there's no more questions, I don't know if before we finish then, if either Councillor, Leader of the Council, or Andrew Crookham as the Executive Director for Finance wish to make any closing comments.
No, I don't think so. Obviously, I think you've had a comprehensive report, and for want of any questions, obviously it'll go to, as Michelle has said, it'll go to our executive next week, actually now, and that will be a recommendation then to our full council.
Thanks, Martin. Andrew, nothing? No.
Nothing to add now. Thanks, Michelle, for the comprehensive presentation, and for everybody's attendance today. It's greatly appreciated, and it's good to see the interest in the budget. Thank you, Councillor Whittington.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, if nobody else wants to ask the questions, can I thank you all for your attendance this afternoon? As I say, I think the lack of questions is probably to the very, as I said before, very comprehensive presentation that Michelle made. So many thanks, Michelle. So at 15:27, I now would declare this meeting closed. So if everybody can exit the meeting by pressing the red telephone button at the bottom of your screen. And thank you very much again for your attendance.